Very good afternoon, and I welcome you all on behalf of Punjab University Human Rights Chair and Association of Media and Communication Academic Professionals, AMCAP. I warmly welcome our honorable speakers, worthy Vice Chancellor, respected Pro Vice Chancellor, and respected colleagues, dear students, and very dear audience. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, walaikum assalam, walaikum assalam.
Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum assalam.
Thank you. So to formally start the webinar, let's listen recitation of verses Surah Baqarah 42 to 44 from Holy Quran. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, do not mix truth with falsehood, and nor hide the truth knowingly, and establish prayers, pay charity, and bow with those who bow in worship. Would you order other people to be righteous and you forget it yourselves? Although you recite the book, do you not have the sense to understand? Sadaqallahu Azeem. Palestine has become a quagmire of social, political, economic, and humanitarian issues. Words are not enough to portray the situation, what happened during 11 days in Palestine. I would like to show you a slideshow just to have a glimpse and revive what happened.
हेलो शोएब साहब जी, शोएब साहब सलीम मजहर बात।
Thank you. Gaza has been described as the world's largest open-air prison, where around 2 million people. Gaza has been described as the world's largest open-air prison, where around 2 million Palestinians live behind a blockade. And they are refused an access to the other occupied Palestinian areas and the rest of the world. On the other hand, what is happening that Palestinian refugees born in Lebanon are denied the right to move to Palestine or to visit to Palestine or have a citizenship or gain legal status by marriage, etc. While if we compare it with Jewish American born in US, so they have all these rights. So this is just to manipulate the demographics of Palestine. This is quite obvious. So according to the Amnesty International's report, year 2020, about Israel and occupied Palestinian territories, Israel maintained its illegal blockade on Gaza Strip and subjecting its residents to collective punishments and deepening the humanitarian crisis there. Israeli authorities used a range of measures to target not only human rights activists, but journalists and other who were criticizing Israel. And they continued occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip and Golan Heights. So with the recent ceasefire, situation is not going to change. This scenario leaves us to ponder what is the way forward, especially with reference to human rights. So today's webinar is an attempt to deliberate upon the possible solutions, what kind of strategies, what kind of policies, and what kind of tools and techniques can be applied to improve the situation, especially a human rights situation in Palestine. The format of this program is that audience can type their questions in the chat box, and our respected panelists, they are going to address those questions by the end of this their talk. And you can also, audience can also submit their suggestions, since the theme is humanitarian crisis in Palestine and the way forwards. We are really looking from the academia and other policy makers and stakeholders that they're going to submit their suggestions as well. And we will compile all those suggestions and we'll share with all the worthy guests as well. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have the honor to have with us. Kindly tell if Miss Leen Saleh, if you have joined.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we have the honor to have Miss Leen Saleh. She's our special guest speaker. She's a Palestinian refugee and activist. She is head of public relations and media in Friends of Palestine Network. She is co-founder of Brilliant Kid Project. She is a rehab graduate and holds the expertise of physiotherapy. She is also experienced in event hosting. Thank you, Ms. Leen Saleh, for joining us. Let me introduce our other worthy guests. We have the honor to have with us Ms. Tasneem Aslam. She's a former Pakistani diplomat, and she holds vast experience of working with the Foreign Ministry. Thank you very much for taking out time and giving us this honor to have you at this seminar. We have the honor to have respected Professor Dr. Nico Carpentier. He is an extraordinary professor at Charles University in Prague. He's also teaching at Virgin Universitat Brussels and at Uppsala University. He has served as ACRIA Vice President and currently serving as President of IAMCR. He has a long list of publications at his credit, and including his research on the discursive material not Cyprus in conflict and community media participation. We have the honor to have Dr. Sima Samar. Dr. Sima Samar, kindly confirm if you are here and you are able to listen.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah,
Sima Samar. Dr. Sima Samar is from Afghanistan, and she is the first ever female vice president during the interim administration of Afghanistan in 2001. And she served as vice president of the emergency Loya Jirga in 2002. She was the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Sudan. She was the chairperson of the Asia Pacific Forum, which focuses on strengthening, developing, and connecting regional national human rights institutions. In addition to this, Dr. Samar served as chairperson of Afghanistan's Commission for the Prevention of Torture. In 2018, Dr. Samar was appointed by the United Nations Secretary General as a member of the High-Level Advisory Board on Mediation, and currently serving as one of the 18 members. Thank you very much for taking out time. We feel honored. Thank you. We have the honor to have with us Dr. Azeem Fazwan from Malaysia. He is an associate professor and director at the Center for Policy Research and International Studies, University Sains Malaysia. He has led and is leading research projects funded by the Implementation and Coordination Unit of the Prime Minister's Office, and other projects including the Special Affairs Department of Ministry of Communication and Multimedia, Japan International and Cooperation Agency JICA, and the Center for Civic Education in California. Thank you, Dr. Azeem, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We have the honor to have with us Dr. Fatma Eizahara. Dr. Fatma, kindly confirm if you are here.
Yes, I'm here. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Fatima, for joining us. Dr. Fatma is an associate professor at Cairo University, and she is a very passionate human rights activist as well, because during her studies at Leeds University, her thesis was about the role of social networks and new media technologies in relieving humanitarian crises. She also served as head of journalism department at Al Ahram Canadian University in Cairo. Currently, she is serving at Cairo University, and she is also vice chair of Islam and Media Working Group at IAMCR. Thank you, Dr. Fatma, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abida, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. We have the honor to have with us the Vice Chancellor of the Punjab University, Professor Dr. Niaz Akhtar. Dr. Saab, are you here?
I am available.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule and joining us. Professor Dr. Niaz has also served as the Rector of the National Textile University, Faisalabad, Vice Chancellor of the University of Engineering and Technology, Texala, and the Vice Chancellor of the Information Technology University, Lahore. In recognition of his outstanding performance, he was awarded Sitara Imtiaz by the Government of Pakistan in 2015. Thank you very much, our worthy panelists, and we have the honor to have with us Vice Chancellor of the Punjab University, Professor Sima Sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Sir, for joining us. So now I will request the Vice Chancellor, Professor Niaz, to welcome our distinguished guest and share your reflections on the theme, humanitarian crisis in Palestine, the way forward. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Abda, the Chair Human Rights. I'm very happy that you have arranged this webinar on this important topic, human crisis in Palestine. I'm highly indebted to my other panelists who have joined us, especially Madam Tasneem Aslam, our eminent foreign diplomat. She was working in the Foreign Affairs Ministry. We are very happy to have Ms. Tasneem. Then our friend Professor Nico, I'm very happy to see you after a long time. I'm very happy, and we expect you will be visiting us soon. Dr. Azeem, Dr. Sima Samar, Dr. Fatma, Ms. Dean Saleh, really I'm very grateful that and I appreciate that all of you who have spared the time for this important topic. Honestly, what happened in the last couple of weeks, the whole world has seen. And what has happened in Israel or in Palestine, the people themselves are the witness how this human crisis took place. And I was expecting Dr. Abda, because she is chair of this human rights, and we established this chair, I think, a couple of years back. And the objective was the same, which now she has organized this webinar or the conferences she has been organizing. The objective was to highlight those human rights violations, either these are happening any part of the world. It is Kashmir, it is Burma, it is Palestine, it is any part of the world. Therefore, I appreciate and your spectrum, Dr. Abda, especially coming back to this important point about Palestine. Since the experts of this important topic, they are there, but as a international citizen or the national citizen of this great country, I can say that this issue starts from 1947 or after this World War II, and the international powers haven't tried to resolve this issue. And this issue is still remaining unresolved at the United Nations level. The United Nations, the scope of this United Nations is to resolve the issues between the countries, between the communities. And I think the struggle one way or the other, the attempts have been made, but the issue remains unsolved. And that is why Akhtar was saying about that this issue is not settled for the time being, it is ceasefire. And this may again arise after a week, after a month, or after a year. Because when the issue is alive, you can expect again the explosion of this topic again sometime in the future. Therefore, the point is, the way forward is, you need to resolve this issue. And the human rights violations, human rights, first is, what are the human rights? It is very clearly defined in the United Nations Human Rights Agenda. The aspects have been defined. You can say all these 24, 25 points, aspects, these have been violated by this Israel. From 1948, the first war between Palestine and the Israelis, that took place. Then again in 1967, again, all the time these clashes have taken place. If you look into 1947 geographical position, both have the 50-50% of the area. And today, the whole of this Palestine is in the hand of Israel. 50 lakh, 5 million people of Palestine, you cannot suppress them because that was their country. And now, what happened a couple of weeks back, that some of the residents living in Israel, they are the legal citizen, but they were asked to, they were displaced, they were tried to be displaced from that area. Then again, this, the Baitul Muqaddas, Aqsa Mosque, where the peoples were praying, again, because that is controlled, under control of Israel, they again try to disrespect, try to blast that mosque. The crashes started from that. And it went to the higher level, OIC level, European Commission, European Union level, all the responsible citizen of any country, any civil member of the civilized society. They cried on the road, they gave their voices for this crisis. It went to the Security Council 4 times in a week, but again, they couldn't have any resolution for the aggression of that Israel. Ultimately, it went to the United Nations. Again, the ambassador, the ministers, they cried. The OIC had a special meeting on this topic. Again, the resolution came from that side. The point is the people's, the civilized citizen, the expert who are participating in this webinar, we expect that being the international citizen, we expect that you will give a certain recommendation for this important crisis. All the citizens of any country, they have seen themselves that what has happened because the televisions, the social media, the electronic media, print media, they were highlighted. It was all the violation took place. It was not only the killing of the innocent people, even the children, the kids, even the refugees, even the hospitals, the people who are for the treatment in the hospitals, even in the schools, the universities, even they tried to damage the roads where the ambulances were supposed to move to the hospital. Therefore, it was a massacre. I think the foreign diplomats, like we appreciate and we acknowledge her contribution, Ms. Tasneem, the way she headed this ministry. And again, the very well-known figures on this webinar, we expect that the recommendations of this webinar, I will try to me, you can even directly, because all the time I was told to Professor Abida, you are more powerful than when I have assigned this task. You can take a lead on any of the topic of the international community, and you can loud your voice. It should reach to the quarter concerned. And inshallah, when you are giving these recommendations to my office, I can send to the highest office of my country or the international community. And what I heard from the United Nations voices, what I heard from the international community, what I heard from the European Union, what I heard from Pakistan citizens, Pakistani or Pakistani government, the solution is the two-state solution. And you can linger on this one, but at the end of the day, you have to reach on this solution. It should be two states, and the capital of that Palestine, I think you can go this Jerusalem, because the main point where Aqsa is, Masjid Aqsa is located. I think that should be with the Palestinian, because this is the first mosque of the Muslim. I think the beautiful brain which exists at the international level, I think another solution may, when you are trying to solve the issue, I think the other solutions may also be expected. And we should be open to accept those resolutions are the solution, and we should give a very thought to those solutions. And I think when the intention is right, when you are here to solve the issue, surely you will get the resolution of those solutions. And with these words, once again appreciating, giving your valuable time for this important topic, human rights violations. I have highlighted some of the photos you have seen on the screen by Dr. Abida. She has presented. I'm grateful, Abida. And again, many thanks to all the speakers, experts, panelists who have spared the time and have joined this webinar. Thank you very much, Abida.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much for taking out time from your busy schedule and sharing your thoughts. You have rightly pointed out that since May 1948, when Israel was established, the entire world is witnessing attacks, violence, and a continuous series of attacks on Palestine. And as a result of the first war in 1948, when it was established, it lasted in 8 months, and during that period, more than 750,000 Palestinians were forced to take refuge in other countries, became refugees. And one of Palestinian refugee, she's a young lady, Miss Leen Saleh. She's with us. So now I will request Miss Leen Saleh to share her thoughts. Miss Leen Saleh, since she's a Palestinian refugee and she has a direct observation of the ground realities, and being the head of media and public relations department at Friends of Palestinian Network, so she can share her experiences and the ground realities as well. So I would like to invite Ms. Leen Saleh to share her thoughts. Thank you, Ms. Leen
Sure.
Saleh.
Thank you, Prof. Abida. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is my voice clear?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thanks
Yes,
everyone. Hi, and a very good evening or afternoon. I'm not sure of the time zone that everyone is talking from. So it's my pleasure actually to take a part in this webinar. Thanks so much for inviting me. And I would like to highlight the main important ideas, let's say, that everyone might be interested to listen to from a Palestinian perspective. So first of all, I wish that in this webinar, we can discuss the current situation that's been happening in Palestine and discuss together further like solutions and our role in this coming solutions. My name is Leen Saleh. I'm a Palestinian refugee and activist. But talking about Palestinian, what does a Palestinian mean in the first place? Palestinians, those who were the original inhabitants of the historical land of Palestine until the first ethnic cleansing, which was marked in the 1948 Nakba. In this ethnic cleansing, my grandparents were forcibly displaced and moved to Syria, which I was born and raised in Syria, and then I had to move to Malaysia. And let's have this in mind, defining the Palestinian, who they are. Talking about other refugees as well, I would like to show you here Muhammad Al-Mansi. He's a Palestinian refugee living in Gaza. Originally, he's from the city of Haifa in the occupied territories. And here we have Muna Al-Kurd, who's the Palestinian activist. She was the spark of the recent events on the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. And originally, she's from Jaffa in the occupied territories as well. As refugees, three of us, we share the same problem that we cannot go back to our homelands, despite the different contexts and the different details that each one of us as a young generation are facing now. So that's for now. That I would like people to know actually how the Palestinian issues is very wided and is very complicated because the occupation has been there for 73 years. Moving on, talking about the current situation that's been happening, maybe we can shortly highlight what was happening in the last month of Ramadan, the holy month. It was a very hectic month for Palestinians. So everything has started actually from Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, following by Al-Aqsa invasion, and then following by Gaza attack, who were actually defending our people and brothers and sisters back in Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine. So the mainstream media have been actually highlighting the ethnic cleansing and the forced displacement and the threats that people in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood have been going through. And talking about Muna Al-Kurd that I mentioned previously, she actually she wanted to speak up for all the people in her neighborhood and her neighbors who were threatened for this displacement since she was born. She's a refugee living in Jerusalem, but she cannot go back to her homeland. And again, she was threatened to be displaced again to another city that she doesn't even know. So the spark actually, she voiced out the voices of the people who are living in the occupied Jerusalem city. So talking about the social media, we have witnessed a very huge revolution. We've witnessed that huge revolution and using the hashtags in all the contexts in the past few weeks. And the mainstream media actually have highlighted the Palestinian ongoing misery, which arises many questions for us. How does that happen? What does that mean? And why is that important? People start questioning the Palestinian issue that haven't been highlighted since the second uprising in Palestine, actually. So asking this, people also had the questions of what's the significance of Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood? Why are people talking about Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood? For example, they're not talking about the West Bank, they're not talking about Gaza. So having this knowledge in mind, It's actually the main thing that we as Palestinians want the people to know and want the people to be questioning. Because the mainstream media, as I mentioned, we're highlighting three main topics: Sheikh Jarrah, Aqsa, and Gaza. But under these three main topics that were highlighted, we have a lot of other complications and consequences that's being hidden, and people are not being aware of it. So in my opinion, we've seen that the media has played a big role and make a huge difference, teaching people the map of Palestine, talking about facts, talking about figures, teaching people the difference between ethnic cleansing and conflict. What does it mean of religion despot and the religious despot and the settler colonization? What does it mean being anti-Semitic or anti-Israel? People start to know these terms in order for them to understand the Palestinian issue and the Israeli occupation from a different kind of perspective. So that's the role of media, which was a very important role in the past month, actually. Talking about that, the battle of the alternative media will never be done. We need to keep on mentioning and repeating this information in order for it to sink in everyone's mind, fighting the propaganda that Israel has been spreading and spending millions of it to share its narrative. So we want to focus on the Palestinian narrative. And we've seen an example the past month how the social media, actually the mainstream, was taking a huge part in that, spreading and telling the Palestinian narrative, which we still have a lot of things to talk about. Therefore, I would like to introduce to you this handbook, which is the Handbook of Journalists and Media Institutions. Is talking about the general media policies of the Palestinian cause. People who are working in such field need actually to have this knowledge and awareness of what terms to be used, what are the policies, the main things that people need to be aware of it in order to create content and to share the Palestinian issue and use in the global media. So that's it for me for now, and I hope if you have any further question, I would be more than happy to share with you. And I just wanted to highlight that keep having Palestine present always in our mind and in the social media stream, and even in the universities, in the school, in everyday life. It's a very important and significant role that we all can do. And thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leen Saleh, for providing us the ground realities and the insights you got directly from your Palestinian friends. So you've rightly pointed out that social media has played a very significant role, and because of this third intifada and this uprising situation, so now people are really trying to know the difference between, because these are two different terms, anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. So yes, media can play a very significant role in this regard. Thank you very much. So now I would like to move to our next speaker, Ms. Tasneem Aslam. Ms. Tasneem Aslam, she is a Pakistani diplomat, and she has a very vast experience of dealing with such issues, and we would like to be enlightened from her expertise. Thank you, madam. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The topic that you have chosen is very relevant, and I'm grateful to you that you have given me the opportunity to talk about it. We cannot talk about the humanitarian crisis in Palestine without talking about its history and the human rights situation. As our very dear guest from Palestine already pointed out, how Palestinians are being choked in their own land, which is their land. They were the original inhabitants on riding on a very false narrative that was created even prior to World War, during the World War I. Today, Israelis claim that they have come back to their homeland, which again has no basis in history because number one, Muslims in Palestine have lived far more than any other community, be it Christians or Jews. Secondly, during the Islamic period, even Christians and Jews lived there with Muslims side by side. We cannot describe it in secular terms. It is a political issue and it is also a religious issue. We often hear the argument that Jews had the right to go back to Palestine and live there because there was Holocaust and they suffered a lot. Yes, they suffered a lot. There was a Holocaust. There was systematic persecution of Jews in the Western Christendom, but never ever under Islamic governments, Jews were persecuted. In fact, in Spain, they found refuge when Muslims were thrown out of Spain. Jews went to Muslim lands, Maghreb and Turkey, Ottoman Empire, and they flourished again. So this argument is very fallacious that they are being compensated for what was done to them in Europe. Well, Christians persecuted them, and it is the Palestinian Muslims who pay the price for their excesses and their genocide. That is one. Secondly, we are talking about the humanitarian crisis there. We were talking about it 2 years ago as well. We will be talking about it 2 years after 2 years as well. Why? Because the fundamental problem is not being addressed. And I primarily blame the Muslim countries, including Pakistan, including individually all of us, because we have not acted the way we were supposed to act. Look at East Timor. It was a Christian population issue that came up much later than Palestine and Kashmir, the two oldest disputes on the UN Security Council agenda. But East Timor got its freedom, but Palestine and Kashmir are still under oppression. They are still the largest jails in the world. So why? Because despite being 57 countries, Muslim countries have not played the role they were supposed to. They have the financial powers, they have the military power, yet they are very weak. They look to the Western countries, to the international media, Western media for covering the Palestine or highlighting the Palestine issue and the situation there. I've heard a lot of people talk about the tide is changing, the Israel's real faces being unmasked, and there have been demonstrations. Yes, this is very humane of those people, the people on the streets of in Europe and in the United States. Yes, they are people who found out from social media what was happening and they came out in support. What about the Muslim countries? What about the Muslim populations? What have we done for Palestine? And I think partly Palestinians and mostly Arabs also have to take blame, that they painted it as an Arab issue, a Palestinian issue, and did not garner the kind of support that was required to to be raised to put pressure, build a critical mass to put pressure on the West. Somebody mentioned UN Security Council meeting and also the OIC meeting. What was the outcome? We have seen it for now 72 years that the question of Palestine comes up at the UN Security Council. organ of the United Nations, which has the primary responsibility for international peace and security. The United Nations talks about, it is based on the Universal Charter of Human Rights. Where is respect for those, or ensuring respect for these principles? None whatsoever. And every time there is even criticism of Israel, the United States would step in and veto, and some Europeans also. This time also, because Israel needed more time to completely decimate the Palestinians, the US did not allow the ceasefire resolution to go through. And then what happens? Palestinians put their life together in that prison, in that strip of land, and then it is shattered again after a year or two. And this is a pattern that we have been seeing. And today we are talking about the humanitarian crisis there. Are they getting the kind of help they need from the international community, even from the Muslim countries? I was very happy to know that some Pakistani organizations are already, they are sending ambulances and they're sending tents and medicines, etc. But it would require a huge, huge effort to at least erect some basic structure there. Hospitals have been destroyed, apartment buildings have been destroyed, schools have been destroyed, not to talk of, which is the very painful subject of how many children have been martyred there. So it is, and tomorrow you will have some new issue and people will forget what is happening to Palestinians. And we also see a very serious, grave development taking place in and around Masjid al-Aqsa. What is going to be the reaction? Are we going to wait till that masjid is demolished, martyred, and then we will come out on the streets, protest a bit, and then go back to our lives as before? We seriously need to put our act together. We could have been a potent force to put pressure on the international community, on the UN Security Council, not to let Israel massacre Palestinians again and again and again, not to snatch their land from underneath their feet. Imagine, can it happen anywhere else to any other community that some people walk into your home and say that, okay, get out of here, this is now ours. This is how the conflict started this time. And you have the mightiest of armies bombarding and killing people, and you have a ragtag group fighting in or resisting or putting up, acting in self-defense, and they're described as terrorists. And this is the narrative that is being promoted in the mainstream media by the Western governments. And I know there are honorable exceptions. I am not going to paint everyone with the same brush. People who, and I think more people came out on the streets in the Western countries than in the Muslim world. So that aspect is there, but I'm talking about the governments and their policies and how they get away with it, because despite being very large in numbers, we have no power, or we don't know what our power is. We have not been able to put our act together. If we don't do that, if we don't focus on that, if we don't turn our discussion in the medium and long term towards how Muslims can organize themselves, how can they become a potent force in international political arena, in the UN and international strategic environment, this will keep happening. This will keep happening to Palestinians, it will keep happening to Kashmiris, to Rohingyas, to other Muslims. Because unfortunately, instead of focusing on the real threat to Muslims we are focused on conspiring against each other and killing each other. So it's a very dismal picture, but in the short term, we need to focus on how to get assistance to Palestinians very quickly, very fast, and what is required there. It has to reach them, put pressure on Egypt to allow these supplies to go in and help them rebuild. In the medium and long term, we really need to organize, harness our power, and who can do it? If governments don't do it, then people, the power of people, their pressure on their governments to give up these policies of aligning with Israel or aligning with those countries that support Israel and strongly standing behind Palestinians, Kashmiris, Rohingyas, and wherever Muslims are on the receiving end of this oppression and genocide. So I'll stop here. We can have further discussion during question answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Tasneem Aslam, for providing us the insights from your experiences, and also it can prove a guideline for us as well. No doubt, Gaza has become the world's largest open-air prison, where more than 2 million Palestinians are living behind the blockade. And you have rightly pointed out, where is Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Where is UNO? Where are the other human rights institutions? Where are other human rights organizations? So we really need to highlight and focus this issue so that world can conclude some tangible, can take some tangible steps to resolve this long-awaited issue. Today, I also received a brochure from one of my friends. This brochure is published by Government Media Office of Mahmoud Abbas's government in Palestine. And this brochure is about Israel occupation, crime in Gaza from 10 to 21 May 2021. And we can have details in that brochure. I would like to share it later on. So just to have the clear glimpse and the facts and ground realities, what is exactly happening in Gaza. Now I would like to move to our other guest speaker, our esteemed professor, Dr. Nico Carpentier, and he he has the experience of working in Cyprus as well, and he has got his article published titled The Discursive Material Not, Cyprus in Conflict and Community Media Participation. And he really believes in participatory communication approach, and he's very humble, down-to-earth professor. He has visited Pakistan for Dr. Spring School and also for conferences. So we are really grateful that he took out time from his busy schedule and going to share views on this topic. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for a wonderful organization for inviting me here. Before I start, I think there's a need for a number of disclaimers because I am talking from a European perspective. And I am sure that with some of the things I will say, you will disagree. I think that this is one of the reasons I'm grateful that I'm here, to be able to listen to you, but also to maybe explain a bit about that European perspective and how things function in the West. That is one disclaimer. I will use quite a lot of visual material. You might not like some of these images as well, I think we can discuss them afterwards. I would like to ask you to sort of stay with me till the end of the talk, because I will move towards a particular direction and work in a very solution-oriented way. That's one point. Second, I do not represent the West. I am not the Belgian state. I am not the European Union. I am not the Czech Republic, where I live and work. I do not share a lot of the policies, and I do not necessarily support them. I consider myself to be a Europe-based intellectual, not a representative of European states. I think for me this is absolutely crucial. Whatever I will say, and the disclaimers will stop, but this is a sensitive topic, so they will have to go on for a short while. Whatever I say is driven by a very, I think, well-developed humanism, for a deep respect for human suffering, and I am, to be honest, deeply upset every time I see the suffering in that region. And in particular, I am very deeply affected by the long suffering of the Palestinian people. But I will come back to that. Lots of disclaimers, apologies for that. Let me start the slide show because I want to show you a few things. The title of this topic is Utopias of Peace, Dialogue and Participation. Reflections on Israel and Palestine. That's where I want to start. I will first give you a brief contextualization, because I do think that it is important to share some of these more European perspectives. I think you'll find some of them fascinating and maybe sometimes difficult to comprehend. I also want to use some of my own research and actually highlight some of these projects I've been doing that very much relate to some of the histories and politics that we're discussing here. And the first starting point, I've labeled chapter 1 of my talk, if you please, I've labeled this Histories of Pain. I think if we want to understand this region, we have to understand trauma. We have to understand that this is dealing with decades and decades of extremely intense trauma at very different levels. And I want to flesh out 4 of them. I don't want to create a hierarchy of importance. I think this is important to me. I don't want to necessarily put them in some sort of a ranking. I think this is not helpful. The first research project I was involved in had to do with the Dreyfus affair. This is actually quite poorly known. This was a French soldier, a Jewish soldier in the very end of the 19th century that was accused of treason. He was degraded and deported to a penal colony on Devil's Island. I found that an extremely helpful and enriching study myself to better understand the dynamics of anti-Semitism, because they very deeply impacted on that case. What is much less known are 2 things. This Dreyfus case became a political crisis in France at the very end of the 19th century, and it almost placed France on the verge of a civil war. I don't think you can underestimate the intensity of this political crisis. That is one thing. It is deeply connected, though, with the creation of Zionism. At the degradation ceremony, you see it represented here in Paris, France, one of the people that witnessed these events was Herzl, Theodor Herzl. For him, this was one of the moments when he decided to develop political Zionism. This is sort of the starting point of this idea. We might like this, might not like this, but this is very much a historical moment where a lot of these forces come together. And that is my first vignette, as they say, my first history of pain. My second history of pain is the Shoah. This is actually a very disrupting painting. It's Banksy that created it. It's labeled the banality of evil. The banality of evil is the reference to a key publication of Hannah Arendt about the Holocaust, where she, I think, convincingly argues for the specificity of the Shoah and the Holocaust because it was the banalization of evil. In the West, but also outside the West, I think that the Shoah has been banalized in the past years. And I do think that this is something to be extremely careful with. From a European perspective, the Shoah is extremely important. It is a very, very significant event, and everybody that is committed to any form of pacifism will use this as a never again moment, something that should at all cost be avoided to be repeated. And I think the cultural significance of the Shoah, but also, of course, the human suffering related to it is extremely important to understand. My third vignette, my third history of pain is colonialism. This is a photograph made by Bernie Searle showing us the pain of colonialism. It's showing us how people suffered, how they were silenced, how they were abused. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is embedded in colonialism, actually plural, colonialisms. There's an important and significant history that is a history of pain of very, very different people. And these pains should also be acknowledged. My last picture I want to share with you, my fourth history of pain, is this graph that represents the number of children killed since 2000 in Israel and Palestine. It has two colors. The upper part are Israeli children, the lower part are Palestinian children. The difference is remarkable. We know this. I am not in any way denying this huge disproportionality in pain. But what I also want to argue is that every child you see there has parents that grieve. Each loss has caused immense pain, whether they are in this upper blue part or whether they are in this lower part. And we should not underestimate the trauma and the pain of what is behind this photograph or this image. Let me move to a second chapter. There is a very strong push to take sides. And I want to propose a third way in my talk. And I want to take you back to the Dreyfus affair. This is an old cartoon. It's in French. I'll translate for those who don't speak French. This is published in 1898 in Le Figaro, French newspaper. It says as a title, "A Family Dinner." It has two captions. The upper part, it has the man sitting at the head of the table say, "Please, for all of our sakes, let's not talk about the Dreyfus affair." And the second caption, it simply said, "They talked about it." The Dreyfus affair was characterized by the polarization between what was called Dreyfusards and anti-Dreyfusards. And it divided the entire country and brought them very close to a civil war. There is a tendency in conflicts in polarization, not just by those who actually are in the struggle itself, but also those who are outside that witness it. Quite often, there are good reasons for taking sides. In many cases, though, taking sides might not contribute to finding solutions. And also in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there is a very, I think, important question to ask, how to deal with that dichotomy, with that polarization, and how to overcome these differences, because that is the road to conflict transformation. And this is on Facebook. It's a short text that I think it's absolutely brilliant, that that circulated. It also landed on my Facebook. If you're pro-Palestine with anti-Semitic intentions, I'm telling you to distance yourself away from the Palestinian cause as much as possible. Goes on. Palestine is a human rights cause. If you're using this to intimidate members of the Jewish community who have done you no harm, then you're defeating the purpose of our cause. I think this is a very clear analysis, which is one of the examples, rare examples of attempts to move beyond these dichotomies that have been created by the conflict itself. We should, for instance, not forget that also with Israeli people, there are groups that are deeply committed to finding a peaceful solution, as this is one of the many illustrations that you will find online. And I will come back to that. But what we should not do is to homogenize the other. We should look at internal diversities and also acknowledge that that other is much more complex and also has people committed to peaceful solutions. Theoretically, my third chapter, and this is where I'll wrap up, my third chapter tries to capture some of these ideas where we can move from what is called antagonism to agonism. Agonism is, I think, a vital concept in these discussions. One of the authors that has been using it is Chantal Mouffe. What agonism refers to is moving away from violent conflict without moving away from conflict. Agonism captures the idea that people can disagree, people can extremely disagree, can oppose each other, but there is a need to take the violence out, to transform enemies into adversaries. And I think a lot of the conflict transformation and peace building efforts deal with this need to transform the enemy other into an adversary without denying the impossibility to agree on so many things. And that's where agonism theoretically plays a key role. It means moving away from radical difference to conflictual togetherness. It means moving away from the homogenization of the self to the pluralization of the self. It means moving away from enemy destruction to peaceful and non-violent interaction. And I think this is, on the long term, a vital way of thinking to resolve intense conflicts. In particular, when we talk about victims, we can also use, and this is a concept that one of my PhD students has been developing, Chris Foniati, we should start thinking about the combination of victimhood and agonism, which means acknowledging the suffering of the other. It means acknowledging that this is about human rights, but human rights are not exclusive to one group. Human rights are shared across humanity. In conflicts, we find, and this comes out of the Cypriot analysis, we sometimes find what Papadakis has called ethnic autism. We find the emphasis on our own victims, on the victims of one side. Well, I would argue that agonistic victimhood means looking at the suffering on all sides and to create empathy with the trauma of the other, which is a vital way of moving beyond violent conflict. One of the areas where these experiments have taken place is in grassroots communication. My research has been on Cyprus, as Abida very kindly also referred to. a divided island split by Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. But in the middle of the buffer zone, you could find, it has disappeared by now, you could find a community media organization that was actually trying to bring together these both groups to have them engage in dialogues with each other, not necessarily focusing only on the conflict, but focusing on everyday life in Cyprus, what they actually shared. And these ways are, I think, ways of transcending conflict. You could say, yes, but this is impossible in Israel. Well, the research we have been doing in Israel with community broadcasting groups, just a few years ago, we analyzed 83. Most of these groups have very close definitions of community. They're very isolationist, very introvert, but there are a few of them that are willing to engage in these dialogues. For instance, Social TV is a small non-profit community broadcasting group that actually is taking this more dialogical route, and that is very keen on opening up these kinds of dialogues between conflicting parties. Does that mean that we should stop critiquing Israel, for instance? No. There is a fundamental right to speak truth to power, and that is our job. We also find that in some cases in mainstream media. John Oliver's talk show, when he was addressing Israel and Palestine, was a clear analysis and a critical analysis of the disproportionality of this conflict. And that is a good thing that these ideas circulate. We should be aware that in the European context, though, this automatic connection between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is blocking a lot of us to speak. And this is one of the typically Western European problems, where this conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is a political strategy to silence those voices that are not anti-Semitic, but that want to oppose some of the Israeli policies. And that has made the life of intellectuals, critical intellectuals in the West, very difficult. But we should also not forget, and I will wrap up, rest assured, we should not forget the work of Edward Said and his critical evaluation of the Palestinian Authority. Also, that critique was vital. When he was writing about the Oslo agreements, and this was in the mid-1990s, his evaluation was extremely critical, and I think extremely important, and actually quite accurate. He ran into a huge conflict with the Palestinian Authority because of this critical evaluation, but this critical evaluation of him speaking truth to power was equally important. So yes, there is a need to critique and to defend human rights, but I don't think we should defend particular human rights. Human rights are universal, and we should at all cost defend all human rights. And that means, for me, moving outside of the dichotomy. It means generating empathy for human suffering at all possible levels. Every child that dies is one child that dies too many. And that is one of, I think, the main messages I want to give in looking at future solutions. And this is my last slide to wrap up. We should not underestimate the way we think about the other in finding these solutions. The way we construct the other in a violent conflict is absolutely violent. This is absolutely crucial. This is an old quote from Saint Keen. In the beginning, we create the enemy. Before the weapon comes the image. We think others to death, and then we invent the battle axe, the ballistic missile with which to actually kill them. If we want to solve problems, violent conflicts, we need to take the same logics. We need to start deconstructing the image of the enemy and transform that into adversaries. Otherwise, we will just continue these histories of pain, which I think we need to avoid at all cost. Thank you. That's my talk.
Thank Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Nico, for giving a beautiful talk. We really need to acknowledge the sufferings of others, and we need to move from antagonism to agonism, and we should be able to empathize with others. In this regard, I would like to share a beautiful hadith that if you save one human being, it is like saving the entire humanity. And if you kill one human being, it is like killing the entire humanity. And it is not religion specific. So our religion really teaches us how to be more empathetic, how to empathize with people, and we need to really understand the sufferings of all human beings. I would like to move to our next speaker, Dr. Sima Samar. Dr. Sima Samar, she is from Afghanistan, and she has a vast experience of working for human rights. She is the chairperson of Independent Human Rights Commission since 2005, and currently she was appointed by the UN Secretary General as a member of High-Level Advisory Board on Mediation, and she's serving as one of the 18 members. And she was the very first vice president of Afghanistan in 2001, and then she also worked for Emergency Loya Jirga as vice president in 2002. Thank you, Dr. Sima, for taking out time and sharing your thoughts. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's really my pleasure to speak in this forum. I would like to start by saying we should remember and acknowledge the suffering of the people and the victims all over the world, including the Palestinian, and also in my country, Afghanistan, because I fully understand what conflict means and what conflict brings to the people, and what cost. So I would not go to my own country's problem, but I would say that unfortunately Palestine and Israel as long as I know in my life. So it's very, very unfortunate because it continues without really taking seriously by the people themselves, by the Israelis and Palestinians themselves, and also by the regional countries, by Muslims and by non-Muslims, and also by the United Nations and superpowers. And the people it's repeating itself and just watching to say sorry for and condemn the violation of human rights of the people. Unfortunately, this time again, we were witness of the severity of the conflict in 2014, and now it's again repeating itself. And it's a lot of causing a lot of hatred and a lot of course, violation of human rights. That's why I think I fully agree with the previous speaker. If we put the universality of human rights and the principle of human rights and our approach in every issues within the society, have it political, economical, cultural, any other rights, we might be able to solve the problem. And I think the issue of Palestine and Israel, again, it's not only those people, but it is, I believe that the people of both sides are not in favor of war. There must be some people who really benefit from continue of conflict in those areas. Because I see the same problem in my own country. This time, at least, a lot of destruction was made. I think 277 people were died and 5,970 people were injured. And among them, it's a lot of 66 children, 38 women, and 17 elderly men. And this is too much. I mean, one is too much because it's caused a lot of damage to the family and then to the entire community and the village, if it's in the village. So I think it's a lot of people who are displaced, and a lot of people unfortunately became homeless, and the whole suffering continues. And then we as a human being, with feeling responsibility to end this kind of suffering by whatever we can. Of course, I'm not in favor of fighting. That's why I'm really against the militarization of the countries, including in my own country, in our region, and your country, Dr. Abida. This is very, very unfortunate that we, instead of really feeding our people and preparing the environment for a better, for the people to live with dignity, we are focusing on militarization of our countries and keep our people, unfortunately, hungry. So I think there are few suggestions I'd like to make, and I'm not in a position to really pressure. Of course, we can lobby and we can put the principles of human rights and human dignity at forefront and fight for that, and advocate for that to be preserved. And that is for everyone, as the previous speaker said. So one, I think, is that we should lobby actually for the rights of the people of self-determination, and actually to have the national rights and to be a citizen of this country or that country. So that is something that all of us have to lobby against, for the United Nations, and also to the American industry, push for that. The second point that I would like to mention is that in propose, it should be a ceasefire, a long-term ceasefire, and it should be a proper monitoring of the violation of human rights by international community, whoever does it, in order to keep the violators accountable. The third point that I would like to mention, that we should not really encourage the people to take revenge, because I see in my own country, we are also already in 42 years of conflict. When we push and encourage people to take revenge, the conflict will continue. So I think we have to push for non-violence settlement between the two countries, and they have the right to have their own identity and the right to be the citizen of this of their country, and also of the world, with a dignified life. The fourth point that I want to mention, we also have to teach our children, and I'm saying it because I see every day in my personal life that we try to teach our sons to be violent and to have gun. The first child that we put for our children is always a gun, to show them that that is not the way that we should live. And that is why we should also push for longer term advocacy of nonviolent and accepting of all the differences that we have, because we like it or not, unfortunately we are not in a position to choose our neighbors. Of course, we are not even in Afghanistan, we cannot choose our neighbor in the house, let alone on the overall geography in the world. So that is something that we have to promote, the acceptance of the differences and the acknowledging of everybody's rights and dignity. Number 5, I think the United Nations should really increase their mediation until they find a solution, and they should be impartial, not to take side of one or another. And that is something that we have to lobby for that. And the other issues that I keep saying, that we have a law, we have international humanitarian law, and we have international human rights law, but we are keeping kind of a silence against the violation of human rights. because we're taking political side. We have double standard. Violation of human rights and violation of IHL is violation of the international human rights and humanitarian law. And those people who violate that should be kept accountable. Otherwise, it's really encourage the perpetrator to continue to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity, and also genocide. We see it in my own country, and we see it, unfortunately, in Palestine and Israel every day. The sixth point that I would like to mention is that we should lobby and advocate for all the religious leaders of different religion to promote nonviolence, particularly in the case of Israel and Palestine, because it was really, unfortunately, was really, really bad. And again, I insist that if we do not really promote the human rights of everyone, and insist on the principle of human rights and universality of human rights, we will come back on the same kind of a vicious cycle, unfortunately, divide the people between Muslim and non-Muslim, Arab and non-Arab. And among the Muslims, Sunni and Shias, we see, unfortunately, we see the sectarian fighting and killing in Pakistan, and we see it every day in Afghanistan. You heard that 2 weeks ago, the attack on the girls' schools. They were killed because of their ethnicity. They were killed because of their religion. And that should be also, should be lobbied for everywhere. And that's why I insist that if we really promote the provision of justice to the victims and promote accountability for criminal acts by anyone, doesn't matter who they are, in my country, in Yemen, and Israel, and Sudan, and let's say in South Africa, and Mali, or in Central African, or South Sudan, that way we can really try to promote the nonviolent and acceptance of each other's difference and live with peace. And then finally, I would say that the international community, we should provide funds for the rebuilding of the destroyed area in the Gaza Strip, or in the other part of Palestine. And all those should be based on non-discrimination and do no harm to the people. It should not be based on political agenda and for that country. And we all have to condemn violation of human rights and promote the principles of human rights. And hopefully we will be able to find a way, and we should lobby for that, instead of like even our colleague, the previous ambassador who spoke, that the Muslim Ummahs or the Muslim in different countries not really raise their voice on support of the Palestinian Israel. Unfortunately, if they raise their voice, it is happening in our region. It's happening in Pakistan. It's happening in Afghanistan. Even if you go on the street, Palestinian, then they become violent among themselves. People are injured. People are killed. Here in Afghanistan, Pakistan, they are supporting the Palestine or Masjid al-Aqsa. So we have to promote nonviolent activity. And I think finally, I would say we all, as a human rights defenders and who believes on human rights principle, we have to really stand on against the militarization of our countries, wherever we are. We like it or not, that militarization do a lot of harm to every human being in every different part of the world. And that should be our responsibility, and we should promote as much as we can in order to stop the whole issue. And I hope that some action will be taken, or strong action would be taken to solve this chronic conflict between the Palestine and Israel. And particularly in this particular year and the situation that we all suffer from the humanitarian crisis of COVID and by COVID. And we are still trying to kill people the way, because we don't like them. And that is not really very useful. And I stop here and thank you very much. And I hope that we will be able to come up with some good opinion and recommendation from this talk. And thank you for organizing this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Sima Samar. Thank you for your beautiful suggestions as well. And as you suggested, that we really need to understand and implement universality of human rights. And without that, we cannot have a just world. Though, almost all the religions and cultures, they believe in this golden rule of treat others as you would like to be treated by them. So, and nobody wants to be treated with violence, with torture, or with any kind of brutality. But in spite of all these things, we cannot see any country with the ideal conditions, with the ideal human rights situation. The question is, if we believe in these things, why we are unable to practice them? What we need to do? It's a very big question. So I would like to move to our second last speaker, Dr. Azeem Fazwan from Malaysia. He is a director at the Center for Policy Research and International Studies. And hopefully we'll be sharing some strategies and policies, tools and techniques, how to deal with these crises, especially with reference to Palestinian issue. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Abida. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for having me in this forum. And I would like to begin by saying that the points that I will be making is purely based on my observation of what had taken place in the Middle East, particularly in the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. And secondly, I would like to stress that my points and my views are from a non-Western perspective. And I would like to also point out that a good reference point to begin our discussion is to acknowledge that the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians is of a protracted nature. It has been going on for decades, and it would be wise for us to acknowledge that the former president of the United States of America, Jimmy Carter, had actually written a book about the conflict. And I think he made an important point when he said that what is needed in Palestine is peace and not appetite. Since we are talking about human rights, we should also bear in mind that the whole idea of human rights should be based on a particular context whereby it started with a discourse that was promoted by the West. The West started to talk about human rights when they were grappling with the issue of the rights of men and the rights of people. The issue of the rights of men came about when the West, particularly the Spaniards, when they encountered the other in the New World, particularly in the Americas. And to the Western settlers, the people in the Americas, the natives, are the people without a soul, and they are not human. They are subhuman. they are people without a soul, and they don't have any rights. So we need to contextualize our discussion about human rights within a discourse that is promoted by the West and that is actually controlled by the West. And we need to bear in mind that the West is the biggest abusers of human rights, apart from what had happened in the Americas, whereby millions of Native Americans were massacred. The West had also promoted the same idea in other colonies. Most of the speakers and participants in this forum are from the Third World. And the Third World was colonized by the West. That our resources were actually raped by the West. The people were subjugated by the West. And we need to bear in mind that Western hypocrisy is abound. So when we talk about the protracted conflict in the Middle East, particularly between the Palestinians and the Israelis, we need to understand that there is a hidden hand behind this conflict. And that hidden hand is the United States of America. The United States of America is the biggest funder to the Israeli military. They provided the weapons to the Israelis to kill the women and the children in the Palestine. And the media in the United States of America was pretty much covering up the atrocities committed by the Israelis. I think the best reference for us to look at in terms of how the media has actually covered the conflict in the Palestine is a book written by Edward Said called Covering Islam. So we know how the media had actually manipulated the issue in America and how public opinion is shaped in America by the media that is primarily controlled by the Israeli lobby. We know that the Israeli lobby is one of the most powerful interest groups in America, and how they are able to shape American foreign policy when it comes to what is happening between the Israeli and the Palestinians. So if we do not acknowledge that there are problems, especially with regard to the role of the United States in this conflict, we will not be able to solve this issue. This issue can only be settled if the United States is serious about the two-state solution, if the United States is serious about promoting human rights for the Palestinians and not only for the Israelis, then this protracted conflict can be solved. Otherwise, we will come across another conflict, maybe a few months down the road, and we will be talking about human rights abuses again in the Middle East. And I think, resources and materials on the conflict are widely available. One of the best public intellectuals in the world, Chomsky, has written numerous articles, books on this issue. And we know that Chomsky has actually nailed what is the real problem. The real problem is the American foreign policy towards Israeli, whereby they are the biggest foreign, the funding from the United States to Israel is the biggest. It used to be the funds were made available to Egypt. Egypt was the biggest recipient of foreign aid from the United States, but now the biggest recipient of foreign aid from the United States is the Israelis. And how Israel has actually portrayed itself. The narrative that is coming out from Israel is that they are the victim. We all know that they are not the victim, but they are the aggressors. So we also need to understand that when we talk about human rights, there are different layers of human rights. There are rankings when it comes to which life is much more precious. So what we have in Israel and in Palestine is what is called colonial, it's a settlers colonial mentality. This is the same problem. We see the same problem in Australia, where we have white settlers claiming the land for themselves. We see this problem in North America. We see this problem in other countries in Africa as well, whereby white settlers will settle in a particular land and claim that the land is theirs. So we'll see the problems between the white settlers and the Maoris in New Zealand. We see the problem between the white settlers and the Aborigines in Australia. And we see how the white settlers had actually abused the rights of the Aborigines in Australia and also in New Zealand. So I don't think the West can take the high moral ground and preach to us about human rights, because they are the biggest abusers of human rights in history. So I think we need to be careful about the things we say when we talk about human rights. Yes, every human life is precious, but when we look at the power dynamics in the world, we know that in the minds of the foreign policy makers in America, some lives have more value than others. This is even happening in the United States itself, where we see the African American community is being abused, and their human rights do not have much value vis-a-vis the whites. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm willing to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Azeem. Thank you. You rightly pointed out we need to understand that human life throughout the world is equally matters. So, and we also need to be careful that the way media labels Israel-Palestine issue as crisis or conflict. So whether it is a conflict, if it is a conflict, then this conflict is asymmetrical. If we look at the history from so many perspectives, if you look at the historical background, so from 1917, when there was Balfour Declaration, and through which through that document, Israeli state was established. It served as a basis to establish Israel state, and later on, what happened? The indigenous people, they were forced to seek refuge in other countries. They became refugees, and they were not hundreds, they were not thousands, there were millions of refugees, Palestinians, who were obliged to take refuge in other countries. And after the certain policies, we see that they are denied to enter into Palestine. Even there is a UN's resolution that yes, at any point in time, those who have been forced to take refuge in other countries, they have the right to come back to their own indigenous country, but they have been denied. The Palestinians have been denied of their right, of this right. And if we look at the current scenario, so if we look at the victims and the killings that have taken place in 11 days. So on the record, 66 children have been killed. And I doubt that there are more than 66 children that have been killed in Palestine. So you rightly pointed out that human life is not being treated at equal footings throughout the world. So I would like to move to our last speaker, Dr. Fatma Eizahara. She's from.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Abida, for giving me this opportunity to participate in this session that really tackles very important and very emotional, actually, for any Muslim and any Arab and any Egyptian as well, because I will talk today in two subjects. The first is the Egyptian role in the Palestinian issue from historically point of view, and also what happened in the last fight between the Palestinian and second is how the social media make this transformational shift in the power balance between Palestinian and the Israelis. Egypt and Palestinian cause, the exceptional role of social media, and also what would be the way forward, because this session is about the way forward of the humanitarian crisis of the Palestinian people. Al-Aqsa Mosque has this centrality in the Islamic faith. He is sacred as Mecca, as the Al-Haram Mosque. In Al-Quran, we have verses that cannot be changed, that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Subhana alladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawla linuriyahu min ayatina innahu was exalted is he who taught his servant refers to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, by night from Al-Masjid al-Haram in Mecca to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa in Al-Quds in Palestine, whose surroundings we have pledged to show him our signs. Indeed, he is the hearing and the seeing. The sacredness of Al-Aqsa is equal to the sacredness of Al-Haram Mosque in Mecca. And this is the central background of this issue. Look, even if we take this religious background is very important to understand. This is a conflict based on beliefs, based on religious beliefs, mainly. And the holy books of Al-Quran and the Bible, the old Bible is there, and anyone can read the text. And
Dr. Fatma, I'm so sorry, we can't see your screen.
You can see my screen?
Yes, we can't. It's blank.
It's blank.
If you can share from your side the slides.
Yes, I will do this again. I'm sorry.
Dr. Fatma, since you are a co-host, so you can share your screen.
Yes, I will try to do this.
At the bottom, you can see an icon with green text, share screen. So you can click and you can share screen.
I think it is stuck. So she has to.
Yes.
The screen is stuck.
Dr. Fatma, maybe at your side signals are weak. So that's why if you have shared the screen is stuck. We are only seeing blank screen and even your image is not moving.
I think she is trying to reconnect.
Yes, I think Dr. Fatma is trying to reconnect. So meanwhile, can we ask a couple of questions from our panelists we have received from our audience? During this thing, Dr. Fatma tries to fix the technical issue.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, Dr. Fatma, yes. Now we can see you as well.
Like the host disabled participant screen sharing. So if you can make me co-host again.
Okay. Yes. Now you're a co-host.
Yes. Can you see my screen? Can you see the screen? My screen?
No, Dr. Fatma, we are unable to see. There is just white space. The screen is totally white. Nothing appears. We can see you.
You can see me. Okay. This is good. Can you see now?
Yes. Yes.
Finally,
yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you see the
Can you see?
We can see the list of your documents, but not the presentation.
Can you see on your screen a button that says share? You need to click after selecting the PPT. You need to click that share button on your computer.
Oh, I'm so sorry for
and
I think उनके signals weak है वहाँ पर internet के.
I think maybe in your area you are facing some signal issue, Dr. Fatima. Your signals are weak, so that's why we are unable to see your screen.
Can you see anything right now?
Yes, we can see your desktop that is saying
Yes.
you have clicked PPT Palestine.
Okay, so I was talking about the centrality of Al-Aqsa Mosque in the Islamic faith. And yes, and that this verse cannot be changed, that Subhanallah zي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الأقصى من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله. And I said that the sacredness of Al-Aqsa is equal to the sacredness of Al-Haram Mosque in Mecca. And this religious background cannot be changed, and this is written in our holy books. So we have to regard this concept, the religious background of the conflict. And of course, we can regard the what Dr. Nico talked about, the human rights issue. But even if we just put the religious concerns or the religious background aside, how could an apartheid policy respect human rights? This is a problem. We have to call the Israeli authorities with its name, which is apartheid system. Palestine actually was part of the Egyptian territories during history, like in this. Can you see this map?
Dr. Fatma, we
Yes.
are unable to see your screen.
Again?
Your screen is your screen is stuck. When you selected PPT, we are just seeing that selection. That's it. You are a co-host, and you will be seeing the icon of shared screen. So if you can try again. Yes, now we can see you. Now we can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, Palestine was part of the Egyptian territories, besides some of the Libyan, Sudan, and part of the Saudi Arabia also. And this is why this is a very emotional issue, because we think that all these lands was part of Egypt one day. And all that the population lived and these places also connected with the Egyptian people with many connections and in many regards. This is the Egypt map in 1840. The Palestine was under the Egyptian sovereignty. Also, the Egyptian army opened the door for thousands of volunteers. It was not Israel, it was gangs, armed gangs, supported by the colonialistic powers in this time, the UK and France, and many Egyptians volunteered to this war alongside with the Egyptian army to liberate Palestine from the Zionist gangs that occupied the land and committed massacres against the Palestinians, and defeat was one of the reasons for the army's movement to depose King Farouk, was the king of Egypt, in 1952. And since that date, the Egyptians bear a great responsibility toward the Palestinians issue, which has been dealt with in various ways during the regions of Presidents Abdel Nasser, Sadat, and Mubarak, and up till now. We have calls. First, we have calls for the implementation of United Nations resolutions, especially Resolution 242. And actually, Israel was denying all the resolutions from the United States. It's tens of resolutions that is regarding the refugees around the world, around the building the settlements on the stolen lands. All this has been just denied by the Israel. So, and Egypt also supervising the Palestinian dialogue, resisting Israeli plans to Judaize Al-Quds, and giving financial and humanitarian aids to relieve the Israeli siege, and give also educational and technological cooperation. And we have contributions to relieve the current crisis, the last day's crisis, the last month's crisis. The medical equipment have been sent to Gaza Strip and the West Bank from Egyptian Red Crescent, and also open the Rafah crossing for receiving injured and send ambulances, and make calls for public donations for supporting Palestine. And I would here also mention that Kuwait is one of the most important Gulf countries, has also launched a very huge donation campaign to relieve the crisis, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and they have collected more than $10 million in the first hour of the campaign. And Al-Azhar condemnation of the Israeli attacks and the reconstruction initiative worth $500 million, and reaching a mutual and simultaneous ceasefire agreement. This is the most important conclusion, supervised by the, supported by the Egyptian authorities. But due to fear, stirring up unrest and outbursts of anger, pro-Palestinian demonstrations were banned in many Arab cities. But social media, ignited by protesters' voices. Social media has an exceptional role in this fight, showing and documenting real situations that summarize the story. Like this man, Jacob, he was really a social media figure now. As we can see this, we will just look at what he has said. I think it's famous in just one second.
You are stealing my house. If I don't steal, someone else is going to steal it. No.
He's just admitting that he is stealing.
Dr. Fatma, your connection is lost. I think she's not here. Dr. Fatma, can you hear me? I think she's lost her connection. Let's wait for a minute, otherwise we'll move to questions. I have sent her a message. I have sent a message to Dr. Fatima. So if she is joining or
trying to contact her, then you can continue with the program.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bushra. So I would like to move to our question answer session. We have got some very interesting questions. And one of our participants, Usman himself, he wanted to ask that how can a student play his part in this entire situation to help Palestinians? Furthermore, kindly guide how we can send humanitarian aid or funds to Palestinians. Is there any platform or how to work as a volunteer? So I think Ms. Lee and then anyone else who wants to respond to this question. So Ms. Lee, since you are a refugee and you also have connections with the Palestinians right now, so you can suggest better. Oh,
Not responding right now.
Ms. Lee, are you here? Can you listen me?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Lee, did you listen to the question?
Yes, I've received 2 questions from 2 students asking how they can join Friends of Palestine Network, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Kindly, if you would like to respond to this.
Sure. So thanks one more time. So for that, thanks for the students who actually were considerated and curious to know more about our network. So first of all, I would like to have a brief about Friends of Palestine Network. We were aiming to provide a model for people who are interested in serving Palestinian cause and having a significant role in taking a part for presenting Palestine. So for the students, we're having 4 parts of this model. First of one is the beliefs, moving to the knowledge, moving to the guidance, and to the role that they can do, and the creativity, which is the productivity. How can you have a sustainable role for Palestine? So for example, to the students who were actually asking, let's say, for example, guys, you already believe in the Palestinian right and in the Palestinian cause. You have specific skills or strengths that you yourself are very interested in. For example, either designing, drawing, politics, writing, law. Moving from this role, we would guide you on how to support Palestine and give us a product that would be sustainable and serve our cause. So for further information, I would give them the Instagram page, and they just feel free to contact me at any time. I would be replying to their messages. But what we're focusing on in Palestine is to have a sustainable role for everyone who wants to support Palestine. It's not only when we have a certain action or the media is highlighting on a specific topic. We're working on this since 2018 actually, and we have a good group of friends, a network of friends in different aspects: sports, artists, celebrities, influencers, students, and lawyers as well. I hope that was clear. I was a bit talking so fast. I believe you don't have enough time to have more elaboration on the answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Leen. Thank you, Ms. Leen Saleh. So I would like to move to the next question by Sana Fatima. Sana Fatima wants to ask that kindly shed light on the West's perception of anti-Semitism as anti-Zionism and vice versa. How can the Muslim world address this misconception while not coming across as anti-Semitic? So Dr. Nico, if you would like to respond to this question.
I think it's a vital question. I think one thing to explain is that this conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is an ongoing struggle in the West itself. This is not automatically accepted by everyone. Me, as an example, I think these are two different things and they should not be conflated. And I've been arguing that on several occasions. What is happening though is that the group within the West that is using this conflation is becoming stronger. And just one example, in the UK, Jeremy Corbyn's position as a leader of the Labour Party was structurally damaged by voices that accused him of being anti-Semitic. And it is extremely difficult to defend yourself against these, what I think are unfair accusations. So you have to be, I think the first part of my answer is you have to be aware of this context. The West is literally at the discursive level struggling with this, and there are different groups defending different kinds of positions there. What is a very important component though is the working definition of anti-Semitism of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which has been accepted by a number of European countries. And I think that definition is problematic itself. It's part of the problem of this conflation. So this is the context. You need to understand this Western context of a struggle over two concepts. And it's obviously that the Israeli policy is to stimulate this conflation because it actually makes it much more difficult in the West to speak about Israeli human rights violations, because whenever you do, you are accused of being anti-Semitic. So it's not only a problem of people outside the West trying to address this, it's actually also a problem within the West itself, where you often get accused. And I think we do need to keep on emphasizing that these are two different concepts. Whenever this conflation comes up, we need to resist it. We're not doing anybody a favor by conflating these two, because actually also people that are engaged in the struggle against anti-Semitism are, in my opinion, being handicapped by this conflation. This is not doing justice to these histories of pain I was talking about. So we constantly need to keep these two concepts apart. And whenever the conflation happens, we need to resist it. We need to protest. And I think that that's a crucial step in dealing with the way that the concept is narrated, the conflict is narrated at this point in time. But it is, for me, to be honest, it's one of reasons of concern, because it makes it extremely difficult to critique Israel, to put it really simple, from a Western perspective, which I believe we should. but it is not easy anymore because of this conflation.
Thank you, Dr. Nico. Dr. Fatma has joined again, and Dr. Fatma, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
So if you would like to continue from the, yes, we can see your slide.
Did you see this before, or this is the first time?
We were on this slide. Yes.
This slide, did you see this slide?
Yes, you were discussing this slide, that how social media ignited the entire process, the entire thing.
Yes, viral images has been distributed of resisting spirit and inspiration. This man under deconstruction, but raising his hand with this victory sign. Mariam with smiling during being arrested by the Israeli police, and also resisting by playing music. Marketing the Palestinians, marketing their endurance instead of marketing tragedy, which is a policy of the Jewish, marketing their tragedy with the Holocaust, and just gain all the benefits from this tragedy. This woman in front of the harassment of the extremists, but just resisting and persisting on its land, and also this man sticking to this wall, saying that he will never leave their homes, and this young man laying on the ground under the leg of one of the Israeli police, just saying that we will never give up. We will never. It looks like George Floyd. I think this looks like George Floyd. Can you still hearing me?
Yes.
Celebrities also advocacy was really very influential tool in this fight. Mohammed Hinadi is one of the Egyptian most comedians, actors, said that we will speak and raise your voice, the Palestinian voice, in this silent world. And this is like millions of followers follow him. And also the Selena Gomez, one of the most influential actors and singers in the world, say it's about humanity, pray for Gaza. And also this man, if you can see, this one is one of the Jewish or the Israeli supporters say the opposite and condemn her tweet, because he said that the Palestinians are the perpetrators, not the Israeli side. Also, celebrities from footballers like Sadio Mane from Liverpool, Free Palestine, and Drogba from Manchester United, and Mohamed El-Neni, one of the Arsenal footballers, they have just formed a huge advocacy for the Palestinians through the social media, and also, of course, Mohamed Salah, one of the most Egyptian footballers. Celebrities advocacy also, it's diatribe Gigi and Hadid, and also Bella Hadid, the fashion celebrities supporting Palestine from this logic. So aren't Israelis and Palestinians just fighting over religion? They are not fighting. Israelis are the oppressors and Palestinians are the oppressed, and the situation is about anything but religion. And actually, this woman is very famous TikTok figure, and the TikTok had participated in this advocacy in a kind of intifada, and the intifada is the name of the Palestinian uprising, first uprising 1989 and in 2000, and it looks like Tuk Intifada. From what it just makeup artist, but she can deliver her word about the Palestinian cause from this song and her art, as we can see this.
بالعيد نسألكم ليش ما في عنا الأعياد وناسيني يا عالم أرضي محروقة أرضي حرية مسروقة سنانا عم تحلم عم تسأل الأيام وين الشمس الحلوة والفوق في الحمام يا عالم أرضي محروقة أرضي حرية مسروقة أرضي صغيرة مثل صغير عطورة.
These are the translation of the song that we are wondering while you are celebrating Eid, why we cannot celebrate or feel happy. Let me answer, please. Oh word, my land is burning and my freedom is stolen. Our sky is dreaming and us today, when the lovely sun would shine and the birds could fly. Oh word, my land is burning and my freedom is stolen. My land is more like me. Please give us peace and childhood. Google and Facebook and Instagram algorithms biased against Palestinians and against Muslims in general. This is a structural bias in these search engines and social media platforms. If you now write in your engine, on your search engine, what do terrorists wear on their heads, they will give you the picture of the Palestinian kufiya, which is the traditional cover, head cover of the Palestinians. This means that they are just connecting the clothes of the Palestinian with terrorism. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
I say Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram blocked the pro-Palestinian accounts and human rights advocacy groups and signed the content as dangerous, only for including Al-Aqsa or Al-Quds words, or as Lynn said, Al-Jarrah neighborhood. They apologized later, referring to technical accident issues, as they always say in such incidents. But it's of course it's not coincidental, it's purposive. Now the way forward on social media, it can be used as a central weapon in the narrative fight against Israel, and penetrating the mainstream narrative and escape the traditional gatekeepers, would let the stories being told as real testimonies and emphasize the similar oppressive situation across the globe and gain international sympathy. The Afro-Americans expressed their emotional solidarity with Palestinians due to this social media intifada. The dramatic shift in the Democratic Party's stance toward the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the considered Palestinians' lives also matters. And this is explicitly mentioned in Bernie Sanders' article in the New York Times. Last but not the least, it is clear that there is a structural bias in the current social media and search engines against human legitimate rights, not only in Palestine, but in many parts of the world. Also was very clear in the Rohingya crisis to express themselves. This generates the necessity to initiate digital alternatives that represent human issues equally and respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fatma. Thank you very much for explaining how social media is showing, is based in structural biases and showing not plurality of voices, but one directional things, and how Google, Facebook, Instagram algorithms show their biases. And you also explained that how the cultural symbol, that is the Palestinian headscarf and wearing, how it is equated with what do terrorists tend to use. So it is the Palestinian symbol, that is the head cover, that is equated with terrorists, which is again something that can be labeled as media manipulations. So thank you for enlightening and providing a glimpse from Egyptian perspective. And we also admire Egypt's role in ceasefire and also sending first aid convoy to Palestinian brothers and sisters. Thank you very much. Now I would move to our question answer sessions. When we lost your connection with you, so we started taking questions. And a couple of other questions I would like to ask from our panelists. Dr. Zahid Bilal from Okada University, he's asking that my question to Dr. Nico, that some days before in an interview of Pakistan's foreign minister at CNN, he was labeled as anti-Semitic again and again during the interview by the anchor person when he was talking about the influence of Israel on media and the imbalanced coverage of Palestinian issue. How we should interpret this entire episode?
Thanks. It allows me to continue a bit on this anti-Semitism critique. And I think that a bit lower in the chat, there's also, I think, a pretty cool answer. There are two things to be said. Just to repeat what I said before, this conflation is a political strategy. It serves mostly the interest of the Israeli state. And it's an extremely tricky and dangerous and a very efficient strategy that we need to resist. So if you get that kind of question, you should deconstruct the question. That needs to be done automatically, and the issue itself, what's behind the question, needs to be raised. I think that in practice, one of the things I've learned when talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is to be very careful so that I don't mix up two words. One is the word Jew, and the other is the word Israeli. These are two different concepts. And especially in the West and dealing with Western media, you need to be very, very careful. But I would also argue ideologically and ethically, you need to be careful not to conflate them. Because not every religious person is necessarily in favor of the Israeli politics, for instance. There are many complexities and we need to diversify these categories. The second point I need to make is that when you start analyzing Western media, and this is very much in line with what Fatma was talking about when it comes to social media, but also more in general, we do find a deeply problematic one-sided media coverage in Western media, where they do implicitly or explicitly side with Israel. And they do that, for instance, by not discriminating between the histories, not discriminating between the number of casualties, not structurally analyzing the strategies that, for instance, Israel is using, right? What Israel is using at the political level is a strategy of containment, where literally people are locked into Gaza, where there is this imaginary belief that would solve the problem, which I think is not only unethical, but also inefficient and unwise. But there is no critical reflection in so many Western media about what is behind the news. And that, I think, is, when you get a question like that, when you engage in an interview like that, you need to deconstruct the language, right? Western media often use eviction, which is not necessarily the correct word. And if people are literally denied access to houses, or when houses are destroyed, literally bulldozered. But we also need to, in these kind of interview settings, we need to bring in much more structural analysis, structural political analysis, arguing that the Israeli policies are violations of people's human rights. We should be clear about that. Now, I should add, to be fair and to stick with what I was asking before. I think that launching rockets at Israeli cities is also not is also a violation of human rights. We should not sort of fall into the trap of hierarchizing violence, and we should not create hierarchies of suffering. I think that is not very helpful either. So anyway, long answer. Sorry for that.
Thank you very much. You beautifully identified that how we should not trap into hierarchies of suffering. So another question from Ms. Amra Malik. She's asking that what kind of role Middle Eastern countries can play in this Israel-Palestine crisis? So, Dr. Fatma, if you would like to address this question.
What is the role of the social media in the crisis?
And what kind of role Middle Eastern countries can play to address this this crisis?
Okay, when we talk about the Middle East countries, we have to differentiate between the formal expression and the public expression. The formal expression is very diplomatic, and they are taking into consideration the peace agreements with Israel and look at Israel as partner in these peace agreements, that they should respect their rights to exist and all all these issues from an equal perspective. But the public point of view still cannot normalize relationships with Israel as an entity can be coexisted with. So this is a main problem. There is a gap between the formal and the public points of view. So when we talk about how can the Middle Eastern countries address the Palestinian cause through the media, we will find the same gap between the formal media and the official channels, and the social media and the public channels of the people to express their views and to sympathize with the human issues of the Palestinian people. The people in different countries, especially in Egypt, cannot demonstrate formally in the streets. They cannot have an official permission to demonstrate in the streets for many reasons. Even there is one woman 2 weeks ago tried to raise the flag of Palestinian in Tahrir Square. She's been arrested, and they keep asking her one question: from where did you bought this flag? Because even selling Palestinian flags is forbidden. So but this woman, she was not an Islamist. She was just the one supporting the Palestinian cause, and she wanted to express her voice. And this can give you an idea about how the Egyptian people, and how not only the Egyptian people, but also in Jordan and Tunisia and other countries, want to demonstrate their sympathy with the Palestinian people, but they cannot do this. So they can use the social media channels to express their points of view in making hashtags and making this TikTok Intifada and others, and also even the actors and the singers and the footballers can use the social media to mobilize the public solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Dr. Fatima. Thank you very much. This is what our religion in Quran also teaches us, that Quran says that our humanity is one humanity. So yes. So we need to rise above. We need to be able to understand the miseries of the people, irrespective of their religion, irrespective of their country, castes, and creed, and all the other realities. We need to understand, implement the universality of human rights in its true spirit. Now, I would like to request our worthy Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Tasneem Aslam, if he's there. Dr. Can you hear me? Professor Dr. Tasneem Aslam is our Pro Vice Chancellor, and I would like him to extend vote of thanks. I think he has lost his connection because in the beginning he was with us. So now I would request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Niaz Ahmad Akhtar, to please say thanks to our worthy guests. Ji, Dr. Sahab.
Ji, thank you very much, Dr. Abida, and all the honorable panelists. You have given a very comprehensive talks and discussion on this critical issue. I appreciate your contribution as well as your input on this humanitarian crisis issue. And I think the recommendations which you have suggested, Abida will, I think, forward this one to me, and I will put up to the higher ups, to the government, as well as required, I will pass on to United Nations as well through my foreign ministry. So many thanks on behalf of my university, my colleagues, highly indebted for your contribution. God bless you all, and I would request you people who are the experts in this area kindly be on our panel for such issues wherever it arises. At the moment, it is Palestine issue. We can see sometime it is Burma, sometime it is Kashmir and the other part of the world. Irrespective, our only one point is that humans should be respected. Values should be respected. The human should have the fundamental rights, universal rights, and these should be respected in every part of the world. So with these words, appreciating your contribution and looking forward to see you in my country, especially I can see Nico is here. I will request that he should be visiting us in near future. Thank you very much, my all colleagues. God bless you all.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you very much. In the last, I would like to proceed to for a dua to show solidarity, integrity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. So, as our last prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, dua is the weapon for believers. So, let's make dua for Palestinians. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanirrahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Ya Allah, glorious is your praise. You are the most merciful. Rectify the affairs of the Muslims in Palestine. Ya Allah, you are the most powerful. Palestinians are weak. They are helpless, so help them. Keep them steadfast. Loosen their chains. Heal their sickness. Protect their orphans. Shelter the widows. Uncover their torture. And grant them freedom. Ya Allah, you are the best supporter. Support Palestinians, as after your support, nobody can overpower them. And if you forsake them, then who will be able to support them after you? Ya Allah, the most beneficent, save the weak and the powerless. Improve the situation of the Muslims in Palestine, in Iraq, in Syria, in Kashmir, in Myanmar, in China, and everywhere. Ya Allah, guide the entire humanity on the paths of peace and lead us from darkness into light. Ya Allah, pardon us, have mercy on us, and remove the curse of COVID-19 from this planet. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Amin. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. Thank you, our respected worthy panelists, for taking out time and sharing your thoughts. And definitely, I am going to plan to put in black and white all your suggestions and the deliberations you have done in today's webinar. Thank you once again on behalf of Punjab University, on behalf of our worthy Vice Chancellor, and on behalf of Human Rights Chair. I again extend my deepest thanks. Thank you.
Also, a quick thank you from me, Abida. Thank you. Pleasure being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Should be in touch, inshallah. Thanks. Bye.